all this week, the media has been focusing on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. We'll be joined in a minute by two prominent Bostonians who will share their memories of that day. But first, the assassination took place on a Friday at 1:30 local time. Here in Boston, Symphony Hall was filled with matinee goers when, at intermission, conductor Eric Leensdorf took to the podium making this announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a press report over the wires. We hope that it is unconfirmed, but we have to doubt it, that the President of the United States has been the victim of an assassination. We will play the funeral march from Beethoven's Third Symphony.
My next guests clearly remember the moment they learned of President Kennedy's death. Tom O'Neill is a former Massachusetts lieutenant governor and son of the late House Speaker Tip O'Neill. He was 19 at the time of the assassination, and Ray Flynn served as mayor of Boston from '84 to '93. He was 24 when JFK was killed. You were still a kid. What were you doing, Tommy?
I was over at McHugh Forum on the campus of Boston College in the stands on that Friday afternoon, just talking to a couple of friends. And somebody came running by and said the president's been shot. We just sat there in disbelief and really didn't pay attention to it. And no later than 30 seconds after that, somebody else came along and verified it, and it was just stunning.
What was your dad doing?
My father was in Washington with my mother for the long weekend, and so they were down just as a couple, kind of enjoying the weekend when they got the news.
Was he in Congress already then?
He replaced Jack Kennedy in Congress.
That's right, exactly. All right. And Ray Flynn, where were you?
I was in the United States Army. I was stationed in Aberdeen Proving Grounds right outside of Washington, D.C. when we received the news. The base went in complete shutdown. Security was extraordinary. A number of us went to Washington, D.C. in uniform. I waited outside the White House. I saw the casket of John Kennedy being carried into the White House, and stayed in Washington and attended the wake and the funeral, and all those memories that I still, to this day, can't get out of my mind.
You also ended up going to the funeral.
I did. You know, we were sitting with a friend after Jack Ruby had just come on our TV, and everybody in the world had witnessed it, of course, the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald, and we looked at each other and decided to thumb to Washington and participate. We get down there and got my dad at his hotel room, and he took us over to the rotunda. At the last moment, we walked through John McCormick's office, the speaker. He was there with Adlai Stevenson and a slew of congressmen and women, and he escorted my father and my friend and I into the that great chamber, that great space where the president lay and stayed.
You know, Ray, you talk about extraordinary security. I was looking at documentaries. I've been going through a lot of the footage this week for other things. And what struck me was there was no security. I mean, they had motorcycle people riding along the motorcade, but speech after speech after speech, John Kennedy was just right there with the people. The day after he was elected the presidency, he was at his compound in Hyannis. He walks out the front door and meets who's ever there. It was non-existent.
Well, the night before Kennedy was elected president, the afternoon, I was active on the campus of Providence College, a small Catholic college, but very much pro-Kennedy. And I saw Kennedy at Providence College, at the Providence City Square. And then that night, Kathy and I went to the Boston Garden, and that was Jack Kennedy's last appearance. I remember he was introduced by Jeff Chandler, movie actor, and so we marched home from the Boston Garden, and people from Somerville and Charlestown walked home to Somerville and Charlestown. People
and North Cambridge.
And North Cambridge. And people from South Boston and Dorchester and Roxbury and Jamaica Plain all walked home. They didn't even take. The euphoria, the innocence, the pride, the admiration that people had about politics, in fact, at that time, was just, when you contrast it to what is happening now, it's like light years away.
That's right. We're part of a generation of guys that grew up under the Kennedy umbrella. I had the added feature of having my dad in Congress, of course, but Kennedy was such a young, vibrant, handsome, willing leader, and he was so different from Dwight Eisenhower, who he had succeeded as a president, and he had this wonderful hope. And so that whole moment in time when he was assassinated was stunning, I think, to the world. But you know, as you look back, he and his brother Bobby are still beacons for hope every time we think about public service, government, and the way we can do things.
I hope that's right. You know, I wonder about it. It seems to be, you know, the volatility. It's
there wasn't the partisanship.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
remember conversations about whether Kennedy was conservative or liberal, and I know people will argue that he was quite liberal. But at the time, there were very progressive politicians used to say that he was quite conservative. I knew Tom Fogarty down in Providence, and John O'Pastore, his son is my doctor. And so I knew all these people from the Providence and Rhode Island perspective. And the partisanship didn't exist, and I think that's why they were able to get so much done. There wasn't this contentious atmosphere in Washington and in politics as there is now, and I think, quite frankly, I think it's very, very unhealthy. I think it's very unhealthy, not only for politics, but for the country.
Wasn't part of it that the country allowed the president to get things done? You even look at Bay of Pigs. I mean, there was a great deal of confidence in leadership at the time, and there wasn't a lot of bickering about whether that was a good plan or not.
Well, it was a very different time. I mean, we didn't have 24/7 newscasts. We didn't have money playing as important a role then as we do now. You know, there was a civility because people from both sides of the aisle, whether it was the House, the Senate, or the President, leaned over and established relationships and bridges between the parties so that progress could be made, and they could work together as a single body.
What was it like for your dad in Congress, having taken his seat, and just the overwhelming sense of sadness? I mean, I was watching that footage of Johnson being sworn in, and, you know, Johnson was a good guy, but he wasn't John Kennedy.
There hasn't been another John Kennedy. But the fact of the matter is, when my father took over his seat, and you know, he campaigned for him when Jack Kennedy ran for the Senate. He campaigned for him when he ran for president. I'm sure you did, Ray.
Yeah.
And I put leaflets out in my old neighborhood of North Cambridge, and was there the last night at the last
Boston
night
Garden.
at that last rally at Boston Garden. I don't know what the legal limit is for having a population in the Boston Garden, but it had to exceed it by a factor of 10. But the pride in this city for that man was extraordinary. And when we lost him, I don't care whether it was Tip O'Neill or Ray Flynn, you were stunned. You couldn't believe that it could possibly happen.
It was the age of innocence, really, in America. You know, they had gone through so much, you know, the communist movement and the Bay of Pigs and all of this that was going on. And at the same time, you had this young, vibrant leader that kind of showed a new hope for this nation. And I saw it on the campus of Providence College, and you probably saw it in Boston College as well. And I haven't seen those days since then, to be honest with you.
You likely won't. All right.
Yeah.
Ray Flynn, Tommy O'Neill.
Thanks
so
Emily.
much. All right, well, JFK's assassination was the biggest media event in a generation. Tomorrow on Beat the Press, we'll reflect on the way news traveled in a simpler time when newspapers, radio, and TV reigned. Today, Twitter would have preceded this Walter Cronkite announcement.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
That and more tomorrow on Beat the Press. In the meantime, we invite you to share your memories of the day JFK was killed on our website, WGBHnews.org.